Welcome back to the Mental Game of Poker podcast. I'm your host, Jared Tendler. Very excited for today's show. Greg Merson, last year's WSOP main event champion and Ivy Poker Pro, stops by and talks about a range of subjects, including how he prepared for the November 9 last year, gives some advice for some of the players who are playing in a few weeks. Also talks about his drug addiction, which he's struggled with for many years. I know he's been very open about it in previous interviews, and I'm very happy and appreciative of how open he was in talking with me today. And he also talks about just how he stays dedicated to the game, having won the biggest tournament there is. Many of you may have noticed that the show has been on a little bit of a hiatus. It's been a very busy summer for me. I got married, went on my honeymoon, went to Vegas for the World Series of Poker, recorded the audiobook of the Mental Game of Poker 2, and frankly got to enjoy my summer a bit. I played in a few golf tournaments, including one where I actually qualified for a USGA event, the Mid-Am, down in Alabama earlier this month. It was my first time in 20 years actually qualifying for a USGA event, so that was very, very exciting. I didn't score as well as I would have liked, shot 80, 78 to finish 200th out of 264, but I'm very pleased with how I played, considering that I only played 20 rounds a year these days, and certainly my mental game kind of kept me as sharp as I was. Just want to remind all of you to subscribe to the podcast by going to iTunes. And for those who are interested in the Mental Game of Poker 2 audiobook, you can get it for free. Go to audible.com or visit my website, jaredtendlerpoker.com/blog, where there's information on how to get it for free. Without further ado, here's my great interview with Greg Merson. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm excited to talk to you for a lot of reasons. I think you've been a great ambassador for poker over the last couple of years. And again, yeah, thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, it's great to finally get on. I know we've had some scheduling conflicts come up, but it's finally on the show.
Yeah, well, perseverance I think is a trait we both have. So here we go.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of questions I want to ask you, but I want to kind of start with just in general, kind of how you've dealt with being in the spotlight over the last year and a half now, and whether that's added any pressure to you. Do you see it as a distraction? Do you like it? Like, what's your take on that?
I try to just stay as grounded as possible and not put myself out there as much. Like after the World Series main event, after I busted this year, I didn't play live for 3 months, which is probably the longest I've gone without playing live poker consecutively in my 6-year career. And I was just playing online, and it was a nice break for me to not be, doing interviews and being stopped for pictures and just a lot of stuff that I didn't get into poker for, which, I don't really mind, but I never got into the game to be like a celebrity face of poker. It's just kind of happened, and I wouldn't trade it in for anything, obviously, because it's the biggest title to hold in the game. But it's been nice to take a break. I'd say like the peak of all the craziness came this year in the main event. And honestly, the only time I would get a break from the wildness was when I was playing the tournament itself.
Wow.
Because every break was just like, I never had time to myself. I was constantly being asked for interviews. I'd be followed by cameras, and I had to like change where I was going on breaks to just like, people want to use the break to like go to the bathroom, just relax, and it's just like the way it is the year after you win. I'm sure it's not going to be like that next year. So it was still an awesome experience to have like a deep run again this year.
Did you find that it actually helped you play better? Did you feel kind of, as you said, almost more free to play, or did you think that it actually affected how well you played?
No, I mean, like I didn't. They started asking about this whole like back-to-back thing at the end of day 2, and I mean that's just ridiculous. Like anyone who understands the game knows how like virtually impossible that would be. So the pressure of going deep again was just like completely lifted. I mean, when you win the whole thing, it's like you can't top it. So all you can really do is just show up and play the best you can. And I was able to make a deep run, and I was happy with how I played. So I've never really felt any pressure to play, all these tournaments or try to win more or final table more tourneys. Like I only played 4 World Series events, and I've only played 10 or 12 live tournaments since winning the main. I just kind of stick to my day-to-day routine of playing cash and, constantly working on my game.
You mentioned it's hard to top it. I mean, that's true in many ways, including the money that you won there. So, how does it now affect your goals moving forward? I mean, how do you what keeps you driven in the game now?
That's a very good question. So I struggled. I've never had any problem with work ethic because I love the game so much. But having the financial, the ultimate financial freedom of winning, I took more time off between December of last year and let's say April than I had taken off in the previous 5 years, put together by far. I was the type of person that was putting in on average 6 hours or 6 days a week, anywhere between 40 to 70 hours a week, and I mean I just love to play poker. So when you're that type of player that needs to be in the game to stay sharp instead of having to take time off to stay fresh, then it definitely set me back slightly. And although I started this year on a really sick heater as well in cash games, it caught up to me around April where I started downswinging and just wasn't as sharp and was having some issues with bringing my A game all the time, which hadn't really been a problem for me for the previous 18 months and something I've been working really hard on. And I thought I played really well throughout the series, but then kind of just didn't play all that great online after the series, and I was playing the high-stakes games on Stars for a bit during WCOOP and lost 100K, which isn't really that much for 25, 50, and 50, 100, but I just felt overmatched for the first time in those games in about almost 3 years. So it was nice to just, get my ass kicked a little bit. Be all right, I need to start rededicating my life to this game. Because I had kind of just gone with a more balanced approach of I'm in a serious relationship. I want to spend more time with my family and just be more balanced. But I got a lot of years to do that. So I mean, I'm not even 26 yet, and I want to still be focused on poker with the majority of my time moving forward. I'm just too competitive of a person. So towards the end of WCOOP and basically the last month, I've been working as hard as I did, when I was 20, and things have been going much better, and I've been playing probably the best I've played since winning.
That's awesome. So it sounds a bit like, I mean, I know you're a big baseball fan, that you're trying to basically treat the game in some ways like an athlete, where to be a great baseball player, to be a great athlete, you need to be dedicated. You need to have that kind of level of focus, and you can't be balanced in that way entirely, at least not throughout the year. You can have times throughout the year where it can be, but is that essentially what you're saying, that you really need to kind of just step up the level of intensity and the time and the dedication that you're putting in, similar to an athlete?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I look at it, and I wish that I was in better shape, because being in good physical shape is just as important as having a strong mental game as well. But I have traditionally taken care of myself. I try to eat as good as I can, especially when I'm playing. And I've had chiropractors work on my wrist and forearm, and iced and stretched my wrist so that I can have a long career online. I mean, I've played 8 million hands online, so I would imagine I'd click the house like 30, 40, 50 million times. I mean, it's just
That's amazing.
so I don't want to. I don't want to have any issues with that, and I just, I want to feel good when I'm playing, so I try to do the best I can, although I am fairly lazy, so.
Well, you bring up a good point, though. I mean, I think the idea that keeping yourself in good physical shape to play poker is something that's fairly newish in the game, the last couple of years. I mean, what do you see as being, like, if you were to kind of paint the stark difference between when you feel like you're in great physical shape and, crappy shape, or just, eating poorly? Like, what's the big difference mentally, or just how you're playing between those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. The game, since it's constantly evolving, has gotten tougher and tougher, as everyone knows, and now it comes down to pressing the edges in every which way possible. And it's not only game selection and how talented you are. It's now coming down to how often you tilt. How do you play when you're losing? How do you take care of yourself off the table? How do you prepare for the next session? How do you turn the page when you've just taken a bad beat or lost a lot in a session? There's so many things that don't have to do with just playing cards that factor into who's winning all the money right now and who's keeping all the money. So yeah, like being in good shape, or like that plays a lot into it. And for me, I got into yoga like 2 years ago, and I was doing it probably 3 days a week for the first 5 months before leaving for the World Series in 2012. And now, because of my travel schedule, I'm lucky if I get to go 3 or 4 times a month.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's I think it's really important, especially something like yoga that's going to give you a nice stretch, some good core strength for sitting for long hours, and then it also helps with your mental focus at the table.
Right.
So it's just like I got into yoga, and I realized from the start how great of a workout it was for poker.
Hmm.
And I want to tailor my workouts for poker. Like, I don't see much benefit in getting super jacked to play poker. So.
Right. You've got a girl, so
Yeah.
No need there.
Yeah.
Well, shifting gears a little bit, you've been very vocal and open about your drug addiction, and I was kind of reading through some interviews that you've given, and there was a quote that you gave that I thought was really, really interesting, just from an addiction standpoint, and I'd like if you could kind of just expand on it and maybe explain a little bit more. But you said part of being an addict is being a perfectionist, and if you channel it into the right thing, you can be successful. And then you also said, I think somewhere else, that poker has really saved your life, and I wonder if those are, those two things are kind of combined, and just, generally, if you can kind of expand on that.
Yeah. The whole perfectionist thing, so when you go through a drug addiction, and it's something that is going to stay with me for the rest of my life, or at least that's what I believe in, and I believe that it is a disease, and there's a general, I guess, outlook on drug addiction as being less educated, low-income people, but when you go through the process and meet recovering addicts, and while you're out there using, you meet tons of extremely intelligent people that are just bored with life, that get into the wrong thing and it takes over their life, and then they become perfectionists of using, stealing, cheating, whatever it takes to be the perfect addict, to always have something available to use so that you don't have to go through withdrawal. And I mean, it takes over your life, and for me to just be able to channel that type of personality to something like poker, where I'm constantly thinking about the game, I'm always talking about hands and stuff with different friends, and just always thinking about ways to improve. It's just and the fact that poker is a stimulant itself was great for me to just fill that void in my life, where at early in my drug addiction I was hooked on stimulants, and then my second time around I was on downers, painkillers. So it's definitely just great to have an outlet to be able to do something that I love and not. But also, I'm just really fortunate to not have a gambling problem as well. Like I don't gamble on like I rarely bet a sports game, maybe like the Super Bowl or like $100 with a friend, no juice. Just I never play table games. I never like hop in games that I don't think I can beat. I don't. If I play really high, I sell. Even at this point where I probably don't have to sell, I'm just like try to be as smart about everything. And I'm lucky that I can balance gambling, which is so addictive, and treat it like a business. Whereas my drug habit, like I could never do it responsibly like I can with gambling.
Right.
But yeah, like it definitely did save my life. Like I was a straight A student for 6 years, and then I go to college and I'm failing out of school and going through a lot of depression from all the drugs I was using. I was self-medicating myself, and I just really had nothing. I didn't know what the hell was going on with my life, and like I felt useless. And that's around the time that I started playing more poker, and the only time I felt good about myself is when I was playing poker. So the first time around that I got clean was because I was paying for my drug habit through poker, but could never build a bankroll because I had hundreds of dollars a week habit. And I was like, well, if I stop doing drugs, I can make a bunch of money. And keep my money and make more money. So the first time at 18 going into rehab, I checked myself in. That was the reason why. And then after making a little over 7 figures over 3.5 years, the drug addict inside me said, hey, well, you've done well enough for yourself, and now you deserve to live your young adult life again. And now you have a different skill set in poker where you're much better than most of the players, so why can't you use sometimes and just control it? But that's just not the type of person I am, and that snowballed very quickly in 2011 from February till December, where I lost like $400,000 and just like played. I had moved up to the high stakes games 3 or 4 months before relapsing and was winning a couple $100,000, and I worked my whole life to get to that point, and then to just kind of not throw it all away, but throw away over half the money that I had to my name in 10 months that I worked 3.5 years for was just one of the worst things you can do. But at the same time, I was only 23. I had this amazing skill set, and at that point, I just stopped caring about how much money I had or how much money I was making. All I wanted to do was get my life back together and be happy. And then like going into 2012, I just didn't care so much about how much I had or how much I could make or how much I was winning or losing, whatever. I was just happy that I was alive and like had my life back on track. And then it's just kind of funny how when you have that mindset, it just kind of like fell in my lap where I could play like pressure free, and I just had no fear of failure. Like I just been through so much, and that's why I was really emotional with winning both the tournaments that I won.
Felt like an extreme validation for all the work that you'd done to conquer this addiction.
Yeah, for sure. And on top of that, the 6-handed tournament is like over 90% of the hands I've played online have been 6 max no limit. So I've dedicated my poker career to that format of the game, and to win the biggest short-handed tournament of the year was just like, I mean, it doesn't really get any better than that if you focus on one specific form of poker, whether it be heads up, short-handed, PLO, whatever. Winning the championship version of your favorite game is like the ultimate.
you are incredibly strong-willed. I mean, to be able to conquer addiction once, again, where does that trait come from?
That's a really good question. I mean, I would say it was a lot easier the first time or the second time around because I had so much going for myself, and I had all the tools from all the rehab and counseling that I had been through to turn it around and have like a nice skill set moving forward to put myself in the right positions to succeed. The first time around, I guess I was just fortunate to be raised by like great parents and just I don't know. It's just grow up in an environment around successful friends and parents where like I wanted to be like that. You know, I didn't want to be the outcast, and I was already a big enough outcast being a drug addict who wanted to gamble for a living in a really conservative town. So, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, I guess, fit in and be successful.
And maybe the competitor in you too wasn't going to allow yourself to fail.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've always been extremely competitive, and that comes from my dad.
Well, I mean, I'm thrilled for you and thrilled that you're able to talk so openly about it. And you've also mentioned too that one of the reasons that you're open about talking about it is that it helps other people. And I wonder, because I guess I've wondered this about people with drug addiction as well. That does talking about it also help you? I mean, you talk about having this skill set that you learned the first time going through, how it helped you, the second time around. But I got to imagine that there's all these small moments where you could kind of start teetering towards a path that's not going to be helpful, and that skill set kind of brings itself to there, and that perhaps as you talk about it more, it's almost like you're just kind of training it further into yourself, so that it just gets farther. It just gets almost harder and harder to kind of go down that road.
That's 100% right, and that's a really intelligent view on your part, which most people don't understand that how addiction works. Like a lot of people just think, oh, you're clean now, you're not a drug addict, like everything's fine, as if it's just like some magic pill that you take and it's gone. Like that's just not the way it is for 90-some% of people that have drug problems, and I think it's like an 85% relapse rate for the first time that you get clean, let alone getting clean at 18, right before turning 19, where that whole age group is experimenting and in college drinking and all that stuff. So, like my first time around, I didn't believe that alcohol was, I never had a problem with alcohol, and I just didn't believe that it would trigger me to do anything else. So I actually drank socially for the first 3.5 years that I was clean, but 3.5 years in, it just took that one mistake where this next time around, going to the meetings where they talk about alcohol is no different than a drug. It causes many addicts to relapse. I finally understood what they were saying 5 years after hearing it for the first time. So, like, I haven't drank. Well, I'm coming up on 2 years clean, but I actually hadn't drank like 3 weeks prior to getting clean because I just never really cared for it. But yeah, I think talking about it does help, and just if I could just help one person that hears this, that's going through it at all, that there is a way out, and you're not just trapped in this little bubble, and that like life is so much better on the other side. Not just because of what happened to me last year. Like, to be honest, like I might have even been happier before I won than after I won. Who knows? Like, I was a pretty happy person before I won, just playing online in Canada. So I definitely think being open about it is good for staying on the right track. And it is so easy to think about the good times because drugs make you feel happy, but you just constantly have to remind yourself of all the bad times and try to remember those more than the good experiences.
Yeah, that's good advice, man. And I think part of my reason for asking that question too is that it just seems like there's just so many people who are kind of suffering in silence and, in the shadows, just feeling a lot of shame about the problem, about the addiction that they're facing. And, you're an example of like what can happen when you're open about it, that you can get support. You can see that it's not something to be ashamed about, that it's something that happens to a lot of people. As you said, a lot of people who are well educated, and successful in life, but have this disease, and bringing it kind of out into the open is better for everybody.
Yeah, and especially in this profession where, you work your own hours, you don't have a boss, you can use whatever you want, whenever you want. Like, there's no drug testing. You're not working a 9 to 5, and like, for the most part, if you're good, you make quite a bit of money, so you just kind of have unlimited money for the drugs. So it's just like, it's really easy to get into it, and I mean, even to just do it functionally. Like, there's so many functional drug addicts in poker that are addicted to Adderall or addicted to weed or addicted to painkillers that get by, and it can still, live their life somewhat functionally, but they do have a drug problem. It's just they're able to function somewhat normally in society, whereas someone like myself and other addicts that couldn't get away with that, I feel like fortunate that I was one of those, so that I don't even have to worry about like where to draw the line. I just know that I can't do anything, and life's great like that. I mean, think about when you were, before the first time you drank, like how happy you were as a kid growing up. You never needed any of that stuff to be like high on life, just to be happy and just like enjoy life itself. So yeah, it's like, it's pretty cool being sober. I know it doesn't sound that exciting, but I mean, I'm fine with it.
Well, it certainly makes life more simple. I mean, you can find enjoyment when you know what that line is. So it makes perfect sense to me, and I am pretty much solidly on the other line as well. I mean, I don't use drugs, drink occasionally, but I generally don't need it to have fun. In fact, there's been times in my life where even having a couple beers made me anxious, and it was kind of this weird thing where I was happier just not even drinking at all. So I totally get it, and and I'm not saying that our way or our individual ways are the way for everybody else, but that it is important to draw lines in your life, and that when you do, whatever those lines are, it's easier to get enjoyment out of that rather than being in more doubt about the decisions that you're making and kind of having more stress about how you're living your life.
Yeah, and when you're in a performance industry like poker, it's like, think about the edge I have on my opponents over the course of the summer, where a lot of these kids are going out partying and then playing in tournaments the next day or playing cash the next day, and like, I mean, that just has to add to your ROI like infinite for a long 6 to 7 week stretch of playing basically every day, and it's just important. But then, like I said before, there's no one to tell you not to go out. You got 6 figures in the bank, and like, that's fine with some people. Like, I just have like big goals for myself, and I want to just like keep moving forward in poker and financially in and outside of poker, and I don't want to put a ceiling on what I can do. So being sober definitely helps with that.
Yeah, that's the athlete in you, and I guess short of being the Red Sox clubhouse a couple years ago, drinking beers and eating fried chicken, you're treating it like most other athletes.
Yeah, for sure.
So switching gears slightly, I mean, obviously you've got the November 9 coming up, actually just in a few weeks here. What do you think was important for your success last year? Like, what did you do during those 3 months, and what advice would you have for people for those 9 who are about to play?
Well, the coolest thing is waking up every day at the final table for like 100 days or whatever it is. It's insane. So yeah, you'll think about it every day, and even the days that I didn't think about it, someone would always bring it up to make me think about it. So it's always on your mind. And for me, I just did everything that I was doing before to get me there. Like I played quite a bit of poker. I played more tournaments than I normally would have just to get more experience. And yeah, I mean, for some people, I could see it affecting them on how they play, being like, oh, well, who cares about this, like, $500 or $1,000 river call or turn call in a cash game because I get to play for $8 million more in 2 months. But for me, I was in such a great rhythm that I wanted to continue bringing the pain and, like, stay in that locked-in zone leading up to it. And I was able to have a really good 3-month stretch. And one of the sickest heaters of my cash game career over like a 10-day stretch shortly after getting back from Vegas. Just like having no mercy on anyone and knowing that I had to stay in the zone because it is such a long delay. Some of these guys will get coaching. Like I didn't get any coaching, but I'm just lucky to have friends that I can bounce ideas off of. I had like a basic strategy that I'd spoken with Tony Gregg and Christian Harder about going in that only really came into play 7 to 9-handed. As soon as I got 6-handed, I knew what I wanted to do, whether I was short or not. So just kind of went from there. I mean, it's pretty exciting that it's only a few weeks away because I'm going to be there, and it's going to be cool to watch from the other side with just no pressure and like watch all the like high pressure situations and like how people are going to deal with it, because every year there's someone that just crumbles, and then there's the people that rise up and aren't afraid of the spotlight. Because man, I'm telling you, that first 45 minutes, I've never been more nervous in my life. Like I was in the 5 seat facing a crowd of 1,000 people, which doesn't happen in poker. And then you got millions. There's millions of people watching from home, and then the biggest thing is that you get 90 to 100 tickets. So I gave all my tickets out. I had people coming from all over the U.S. to watch, and if you're not from the U.S., even farther. So no one wants to get knocked out in the first hour, but that shouldn't be in your head. You should only be focusing on playing the best you can. But there's just all these scenarios that go into it that you could never prepare for. Like I don't care how many simulations you do. Like you're going to be playing for more money than you've ever played in your life, even if you played super high stakes cash games. There's usually not $8 million up for grabs ever. So it's just like a once in a lifetime thing that, like, even if one of these guys tried to hire me as a coach to help them prepare mentally for it, I mean, it's real tough. There's just nothing like it in our game to prepare for a moment like that. Like, I settled in really nicely after that first 45 minutes, and then coming back 3-handed, I was super calm and, like, relaxed. But just the whole environment for the first, like, few orbits, or, like, couple orbits, I guess. Like, I've never been that nervous playing poker in my life.
I can imagine. I'm a terrible poker player, so I didn't actually make this analysis, but my co-author Barry Carter and some of his friends were kind of analyzing your play, and they sort of surmised that you just didn't make any big mistakes. Do you think that is what one? Do you think that's true, especially compared to the other players there? And two, do you think, because I'm really interested by what you're saying, that you just kind of stayed sharp through those 3 months and really kind of try to play really aggressively and show no mercy. Do you think that kind of training kind of allowed you to stay sharp in such a chaotic, pressure-filled environment?
Yeah, for sure. And I also, like, one of the ways I was preparing was I was playing much longer cash game sessions than I normally would. Like, I'll normally play 8 to 12 hours, and even if I'm in a great game, as soon as I start losing my concentration, I just quit because you're giving up so much of an edge. But I was putting in 16, 20, 24-hour sessions where, like, I couldn't even really play that well anymore, but I was just pushing myself, knowing that because we were going in so deep that you could see a situation where either day 1 or day 2 of the final table where you have to play so long under a very pressured situation. So I wanted to be prepared for that, and that paid off for sure. And and just having the experience playing long hours in general, 6 days a week. But yeah, I think like with how tough No Limit has gotten, I look at the game a little differently now, where people will still make mistakes no matter how good they are, and you need to just be so aware of what the table dynamic is and minimize your mistakes. Like, you're never going to play perfect. There's just so much incomplete information that you can just, make the best decision and move on. But your extremely big decisions, it's important to take your time and just like not make those big mistakes, because that's where all the money is won and lost in this game, and it's way more important now than it was 2-3 years ago, where people would actually tilt. Talking about these like high stakes games, the pros that are in there, they're there for a reason. Like, they don't tilt, and they're very talented players. So you just gotta like stay locked in, and playing against that competition, and then playing against these guys at the final table, it's like a fairly decent drop-off, and I felt like way more mentally strong than they were for like battle, essentially, and to just make the correct decisions with like the experience I have playing the game itself.
It sounds like that the mental strength that you had, at the time that it was like the most important time in your life to have it. Maybe short of, the times where you were actually recovering from your addiction. But it seems like the trajectory of the whole year kind of was moving towards that, where you got sober again in December, January, kind of working towards that. Your game kind of steadily progresses. You play fantastic during the World Series. Those 3 months where you're what I would call overtraining, just playing those super long hours, really being as aggressive as you can. It seemed like the whole trajectory of the year was kind of building towards that. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty wild just looking back on it, because I started the year coming off of a downswing and getting sober, where like my brain chemistry is changing, and I need to give myself time to just settle back into things. So what most people don't know is that I started playing 1-2 at the beginning of 2012 online, which is a game I haven't played since 2008, just because I wanted to start rebuilding confidence and like start building wins to then move up. And then in February, I won. I was like by far the biggest winner at 2-4 on the site I was playing on. And then by the time I left for the series, I was the biggest winner at 5-10 for that site, and like second or third for 3-6. And I was back to playing 5-10 and 10-20 mostly for the last couple months before going to the series, and just everything was building where I was feeling good, playing good. And then going into the series, it was just like a similar progression of 21st in the 3K6 max, and then 5th in the 4K6 max, or 2K 2500 4 max, and then winning the 6 max, and then winning the main. Obviously, you have to run super sick good. It's not like you just like run people over in tournaments. There's a bunch of all-ins that you have to win, but like tourneys just seem to go like that each year. Someone just wins like 4 or 5 tourneys in a year, like a Dan Smith last year, or even like what Seidel did in 11. Like, you're just in this zone and things are going your way, and that you expect them to go your way, and you just play like above the rim, just better than anyone at the table. So it's just it's crazy how it goes, in streaks like that. But
it's been an amazing ride, and I kind of kept you longer than I anticipated, but I do have one last question for you, which admittedly is a bit self-serving, because you'd mentioned in our conversations that listening to the audiobook of The Mental Game of Poker kind of was part of that run. Can you just maybe talk about maybe how it helped you, or where or when you were using it?
Yeah, so my biggest problem throughout my career that I've worked so hard on was that playing online, playing 1,500 to 1,800 hands an hour for the first 3 years of my pro career. I mean, I had like 3 losing months and like 40 months, and they were always when I would move up, and I was getting in over 100,000 hands a month easily, and like, when you put in that type of volume, you're pretty much never going to lose. So I would, well, if you can beat the games. So I would typically lose like 1 day a week, 5 to 6 days a month, and I didn't know what it was like to lose or like really go through variance. And then when I started playing live poker, where you only get to see X amount of hands an hour, and the variance is much, much, much more spread out. It took me several years to get to the point where right around getting to Vegas last year, it was really starting to that was my main focus, was just being as patient as possible and not forcing it, and really just not worrying about losing 10 sessions in a row, just as long as I played well, because that's going to happen in live poker. You just don't see enough hands. So my buddy, my roommate, and the guy I travel everywhere with, Tony Gregg, told me that I should read The Mental Game of Poker, and he had told me that I should have done that a year prior, and I never got around to it. And then, because I hate reading, and then he told me that, hey man, they have it on audiobook, you should just buy it on iTunes, or you can listen to it, I have it. And middle of June 2012, I download it or buy it off iTunes and listen to it every night over the course of 4 or 5 nights as I'm going to sleep during the series. And man, it was just great. And I couldn't endorse it more. I've done interviews where people ask me what book I would recommend, and that's the only book that I ever recommend. I couldn't agree with the philosophy of the book itself more. It's just so important, and anyone who struggles with that stuff, which is most of the poker community, because it's just human nature. It's just a great thing to read or to listen to if you don't like reading. And I know that the Mental Game of Poker 2 just came out, and is it out on audio yet? Because when I checked last, it wasn't.
Yeah, it just came out in late September. It took a while to finish that up.
Okay, yeah, sweet. So I'll be listening to that probably on my next flight. So.
Awesome. Well, it's incredible to hear you say that, Greg, and I really appreciate your feedback on it, man. And I, as well as everybody else listening, continues to wish you well, and you fighting the good fight in those small ways to continue to battle your addiction, and just keep progressing forward, man. You've done a lot for the community, and I know a lot for yourself. Obviously, those two go hand in hand. So, wish you well, man, and maybe down the line get you back on again, or at least maybe get to meet in person next year in Vegas.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks again to Greg for a fantastic conversation, and thank you all for listening. I hope you found it inspiring and insightful, and maybe found a few things that will help you with your mental game. For those who want more information about Greg, you can go to his website, gregmersonpoker.com. You can also follow him on Twitter, @GregMerson. You can also follow me on Twitter, @JaredTendler. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, the Mental Game of Poker 2 audiobook is now available, and you can also get it for free via audible.com, or if you want more information, go to jaredtendlerpoker.com/blog. And I remind all of you to rate and review the podcast via iTunes. And that is all for this week's show. Happy to be back in the saddle. I'll be back very soon with another episode, and until then, I wish you all very well.